On September 19, 2025, the Supreme Court of the United States delivered a decision that will be remembered for decades. It struck down the sweeping tariffs imposed during the Trump administration. This ruling doesn't just affect prices, it fundamentally shifts the balance of power in Washington and redefines America's global role. The court ruled that the president cannot impose tariffs for national security reasons without clear, ongoing approval from Congress. This is about more than taxes. It's a statement on the limits of presidential authority. The law used to justify these tariffs, Section 232, can no longer be a blank check. The message is clear. Regulating commerce is Congress's job as the Constitution intended. A tariff is a tax on imported goods, like adding $125 to a $500 phone from China. The idea is to make foreign products pricier, nudging consumers to buy American. Tariffs have been used for centuries, but they're a double-edged sword. They protect some jobs but raise costs for everyone. They can spark retaliation, hurting American exporters and farmers. The Supreme Court's decision forces a new debate. Who really benefits from tariffs and who pays the price? The tariffs at the heart of this case were central to President Trump's America First agenda. They were not just economic measures, but a bold statement to the world that the United States would prioritize its own industries and workers above all else. Trump's approach was unapologetically confrontational, aiming to shake up the status quo and send a clear message to both allies and rivals. Starting in 2018, his administration used Section 232 to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum, even from close allies like Canada and the European Union. The move was justified on national security grounds, arguing that a strong domestic metals industry was vital for the country's defense and economic independence. The goal was clear: revive American manufacturing, protect jobs, and counter decades of what Trump called unfair trade practices by foreign competitors. Supporters hoped these tariffs would breathe new life into struggling factories and restore pride in the Made in USA label. This marked a sharp break from decades of free trade policy, which had encouraged open markets and global supply chains. For years, both Republican and Democratic administrations had championed free trade as a path to prosperity. In the short term, American steel and aluminum producers saw tangible gains. Plants that had been shuttered reopened, and workers who had lost their jobs returned to the factory floor, sparking hope in communities hit hard by industrial decline. But for companies that rely on steel and aluminum, like car makers and appliance manufacturers, the story was very different. They faced soaring costs for raw materials, squeezing their profit margins and forcing tough decisions. Many of these businesses had to lay off workers or pass the higher costs onto consumers by raising prices, making everyday goods more expensive for American families. The tariffs didn't just stay at home, they sparked a global trade war. Major trading partners like China, the EU, Canada, and Mexico retaliated with their own tariffs, targeting American exports from soybeans to motorcycles. American farmers and manufacturers were hit hard by these counter tariffs. Many saw their exports plummet, and some faced financial ruin as foreign markets closed their doors. The result was widespread economic uncertainty. Supply chains were disrupted, alliances with key partners were strained, and the stock market became increasingly volatile as businesses struggled to adapt to the new reality. While the policy protected a few industries, it hurt many more. Some workers celebrated new opportunities, but countless small businesses and retailers struggled to survive. The economic landscape became a battlefield, with businesses and consumers caught in the crossfire, facing tough choices and mounting uncertainty about the future. The trade war's ripple effects were felt far beyond Washington, reaching into rural America, global financial centers, and households across the country. Now, with the Supreme Court's decision, this disruptive era comes to a close, leaving behind a legacy of bold action, deep divisions, and lessons for the future of American trade policy. The legal challenge began almost immediately, led not by foreign governments, but by American businesses themselves. These were companies and entrepreneurs who felt the direct impact of the new tariffs, and they wasted no time in seeking justice through the courts. Thousands of importers and manufacturers across the country argued that the president had overstepped his constitutional authority. They claimed that only Congress, not the executive branch, has the power to tax and regulate commerce with foreign nations, a principle rooted in the very foundation of American government. The case, Universal Forgings vs. United States quickly became a focal point for this debate. At its heart was a single question: was Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act being abused to justify sweeping executive action? Plaintiffs argued that the administration had stretched the definition of national security far beyond its intended meaning. They asked, how could steel imported from Canada, a close ally, possibly be considered a threat to America's safety? Many believe the law was being used as a pretext, not for genuine security concerns, but to launch a trade war that would disrupt global markets and hurt American businesses and consumers alike. The government, however, pushed back forcefully. Officials argued that the president must have broad discretion to define and respond to security threats, especially in a rapidly changing world where economic strength is closely tied to national defense. They insisted that a strong domestic manufacturing base is not just an economic issue, but a matter of national security. Without it, the country could be vulnerable in times of crisis or conflict. The case soon became a major test of the separation of powers. Could the president use broad and sometimes vague security claims to impose massive taxes and reshape the economy without congressional approval? Legal scholars, business groups, and civil liberties advocates watched the proceedings closely, recognizing that the outcome could redefine the limits of executive authority for years to come. The Supreme Court's decision would not only resolve this case, but also set a powerful precedent for how much power the president holds over trade and national security. The stakes were enormous, the very balance between the executive and legislative branches, and the future of American democracy hung in the balance. Ultimately, the outcome would shape not just the future of American trade policy, but also the way democracy functions in the United States for generations to come. In a landmark 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court sided with American businesses. Chief Justice Roberts wrote that the president's use of Section 232 had become too broad. The court didn't strike down the law but ruled tariffs must have a clear, direct link to national defense, not just economic protectionism. Congress can delegate some authority but not its core constitutional powers. The ruling invalidates tariffs based on broad economic security arguments. Future administrations must show a real connection between imports and military needs. The law returns to its original, narrow intent. Dissenting justices warned this could limit presidential flexibility in crises, but the majority insisted there are constitutional guardrails on presidential power. The decision reasserts judicial and congressional oversight over trade. It's a major shift in how America makes trade policy. The ruling triggered immediate economic shockwaves, sending ripples through financial markets and boardrooms across the country. News of the decision spread rapidly, with analysts and business leaders scrambling to assess the implications for their industries and bottom lines. Billions in tariff refunds are now on the table for thousands of American companies. For many, this represents not just a return of funds, but a chance to reinvest in growth, innovation, and jobs. The scale of these refunds is unprecedented, and companies are eager to reclaim money that was previously tied up by the tariffs. Businesses that paid illegal tariffs can file claims for relief, a process that could take years but means a major cash infusion. For small and medium-sized enterprises, this relief could be the difference between survival and closure, offering a lifeline after years of financial strain. Legal teams and accountants are now working overtime to ensure every eligible claim is filed. For importers and manufacturers, costs drop overnight, boosting competitiveness and potentially lowering prices for consumers. Lower input costs mean companies can pass savings along the supply chain, making American-made goods more attractive both at home and abroad. Shoppers may soon notice price reductions on everything from appliances to automobiles. The end of tariffs removes uncertainty and financial pressure from many sectors. Companies can now plan for the future with greater confidence, investing in new projects and hiring more workers. Relief is palpable as executives see a clearer path forward. But for American steel and aluminum producers, the protection is gone. They must now compete globally. Without tariffs, these industries face renewed competition from lower-cost foreign producers, forcing them to adapt quickly or risk losing market share. Some may scale back or rethink expansion plans. Projects that once seemed profitable under tariff protection are now being reevaluated, and some companies may delay investments or reduce their workforce to stay competitive. The ruling highlights the trade-offs in any policy. What helps one sector can hurt another. Lawmakers and economists are now debating how best to balance the interests of consumers, manufacturers, and workers in a rapidly changing global economy. Financial markets responded with cautious optimism, stocks of affected companies rose. Investors are betting that lower costs and increased certainty will drive profits, but some remain wary of potential volatility as industries adjust. The US dollar fluctuated as traders assess the broader impact. Currency markets are sensitive to shifts in trade policy, and the end of tariffs has introduced new variables into global exchange rates. The end of tariffs is a major economic event, drawing headlines and sparking debate across the nation. Experts are weighing in on what this means for America's role in global trade and the future of domestic industries. It will take months for the full effects to become clear. As businesses adapt and consumers respond, the true winners and losers of this policy shift will emerge over time. Businesses and markets are now adjusting to a new legal and commercial landscape. The coming months will be a period of transition as companies navigate new opportunities and challenges in a post-tariff economy. American small business owners greeted the ruling with relief. Maria Flores, a Texas construction company owner, said the steel tariffs were a constant headache. Now, she can finally plan ahead. David Chen, an electronics importer, called the tariffs a blanket tax that hurt businesses and consumers alike. For many, the decision restores predictability and fairness. America's trading partners welcomed the news. The EU called it a step toward de-escalating trade tensions. Canada expressed hope for renewed cooperation. These allies see the ruling as a rejection of unilateralism. They're now looking for the US to lift retaliatory tariffs. China's response was more cautious, noting many tariffs remain. The world is watching. Is this a turning point in US trade policy, or just a legal correction? Deep disagreements with China persist, but the decision signals a shift. Global partners are hopeful, but realistic about the challenges ahead. This ruling is a turning point in the long struggle over trade authority. The Constitution gives Congress, not the President, the power to regulate foreign commerce. For decades, Congress delegated more power to the executive branch. The Supreme Court has now set limits on that delegation. Trade policy must return to Congress, where it's debated and decided by elected representatives. Presidents will need to build coalitions and persuade lawmakers to impose tariffs. Sweeping unilateral trade wars are now much less likely. The decision empowers individual lawmakers and strengthens the legislative branch. The balance of power shifts back toward Capitol Hill. It's a major recalibration of American government. As the dust settles, America faces a new era in trade and law. The end of Trump-era tariffs doesn't mean a return to the past. It opens a new chapter. The debate over free trade versus protectionism now moves to Congress. The government must process refund claims and help industries adapt. Diplomacy will be needed to unwind retaliatory tariffs and repair alliances. The ruling reaffirms the separation of powers and the rule of law. The president is not above constitutional checks, even in trade and security. This decision sets a precedent for future limits on executive power. The future of American trade will be shaped by choices made in Congress. One thing is clear: the era of unilateral trade wars is over, and a more complex era has begun.